now. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the fact that their definition says that market rate housing means housing without rent controls. The subsidized housing that they talk about later on when they talk about how companies like Microsoft are helping people to afford these housing, understand that this is them subsidizing the cost of building a house. It's not them rent controlling the house. So actually that would fall under their definition of market rate housing. So understand their definition doesn't talk about what they're actually talking about, so that point's not going to be mutually exclusive. But now just like a general understanding of what we're talking about today. The affirmation is saying that, well, we should be building more homes, and the negation is saying that we shouldn't. Specifically, the affirmation, we are arguing that we should remove zoning restrictions, or we should upzone, in order to create more supply of houses. We would agree with a lot of the negation case, and that's simply just because of the fact that a lot of their statistics come from the status quo. And in the status quo, there are intense zoning restrictions, so developers can't build more houses. And they agree with this logic in their contention to in their first link, where they say that because of limited land supply, landlords raise prices. So the overview on their whole case is that all of the harms of market rate housing they talk about exist only in a world where we have these zoning restrictions, meaning that all the harms persist in their world, but if you vote affirmation, you have to remove zoning restrictions due to the two links we give you in case, thus getting out of all of their harms. Now specifically on the line by line. First, on their contention, what about displacement and price hikes? They talk about private equity firms, but their card talks about people like selling homes at like home shows. What this means is that they're talking about like these big, nice houses that are all around the country. So first, this isn't just in urban areas, so the card doesn't apply. Second, we're really talking about apartments here, because people aren't selling these nice garden homes and whatever like HGTV type homes at a home show, but in the middle of a city in a high rise. So their card doesn't apply within the cities. The reason landlords are buying these homes, a landlord doesn't say, oh, I want to make a housing investment, so I'm going to go buy an apartment on the 34th floor in Seattle. No, they buy an actual physical house. So the card doesn't apply when we're talking about rents. But furthermore, Leschnauer 18 explains that it actually makes no sense for landlords to jack up prices, because this would mean that they lose out on the profit. Furthermore, Art 19 says that the reason why houses are so expensive right now is not because of landlords jacking up prices or investors jacking up prices, but rather it's because of a constrained supply. Which is why in our case we tell you that the private equity firms keep jacking up prices in their world. But if you vote for the affirmation and allow us to remove zoning restrictions, that's the only way to solve this problem. Next, they talk about the ripple effect. And again, the only reason why a housing ripple effect happens, as we tell you in our case, is because in the status quo, when there's limited housing, if a rich person wants to move into a city, they have to buy a poor person's house. However, if we increase development, therefore this ripple effect will no longer happen. Again, they don't solve, but we do. This also turns their two impacts of education and health due to homelessness, because if we increase the amount of people living in houses, the homeless goes down. Next, they talk about the housing crisis, and their main solvency is that companies are going to be subsidizing this. First, understand that this is still definitionally market rate housing under their case, so we access it just on the basis of definition. But furthermore, as you heard in the last crossfire, my partner asked them, why are the companies do this? And they said it's for CSR. They want good public relations with the companies and with the public, right? So why would companies stop doing this just because you affirm? There's no reason why removing zoning restrictions in cities would suddenly cause Microsoft to pull back their $500 million promise. So what we can see is that in both worlds, companies will continue their promise to subsidize housing. So all of their impacts, we agree with, and it's great that companies are doing this, but it's not just unique to their world. So if you vote affirmation, you get both the benefits they talk about and the benefits of upzoning and building more houses due to more land supply that we do. This is also going to turn their link on limited land supply, because the affirmation directly increases the amount of land supply. Next, they talk about an influx of wealthy, and this is a misunderstanding of how the market works. Of course, sometimes when you build new houses, more people will move in, but that assumes that demand for housing is perfectly inelastic, which it isn't. There are many costs associated with moving, such as having to pull your kids to a different school district and whatsoever. So ultimately, we see that anytime we build 100 new houses, it doesn't mean that all 100 are immediately going to be filled by influx of wealthy people. Finally, on replacing existing housing, this only happens in a world where we don't upzone. Meaning, in their world, the existing housing gets replaced, but in our world, there's more space to build housing, so you don't have to replace it. So you're going to vote affirmation. Thank you.
Okay. I use the pet.